In your employment search, you have noticed or you will notice that almost every application is different. And the same is true with interviews. Not only are the personalities of the people interviewing you different, but how businesses conduct interviews is different. And on this episode, I'm going to talk about a type of interview that you may encounter in your employment search: open interviews. What are they? How are they different than regular interviews? How can you prepare yourself for this type of interview? You will hear the answers to these questions on this episode. It's the week of October 6th through the 10th, and you're watching the QC Step Podcast. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the QC Step Podcast. I'm Corey Finneran. Before we get into the main topic for this episode, there's a few things that I wanted to mention. Last week I went to Sherrard High School and I helped the students in Mrs. Jackson's class set up their LinkedIn profiles. And when I go into your schools and I talk about how you can use social media to connect with businesses and get jobs, I talk about LinkedIn, but I don't think I've talked about it too much here on the podcast. I've probably been in 25 classes giving that social media presentation. I think I've only had one student that said they had heard of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the social network for employment. You can connect with businesses on there, but I think that the most useful aspect of LinkedIn for high school students is that you can use it as a way to keep track of your work experiences. If you've worked part-time jobs or if you've been part of a skill-building training site through your STEP class, this is a perfect place for you to keep track of those things. You can basically put together an online resume through your LinkedIn page. And there's some other features, and I'd like to put together a tutorial on LinkedIn soon. But anyways, when we were filling out these profiles, one of the students noticed that LinkedIn shared a fact with him on the side of the page, and it said that 1 in 5 managers hired someone because of their volunteer experiences. And I bring up volunteer work a lot here on the QC Step Podcast, and it's a very easy way to beef up the work experience portion of your applications. And it also shows hiring managers that you're not selfish with your time and that you do things to help other people. And at the end of last school year, I wrote a blog post that's entitled How to Find Summer Volunteer Work. And it doesn't matter the time of the year, this information is valid in the summer, the fall, the winter, the spring, anytime. And in that blog post, I talked about how volunteer work can help you with your job search if you're under 16 years old or if you're over 16 years old. And I will link to that blog post in the write-up that's under this video on qcstep.com. And so you can go there through that way, or you can go to qcstep.com/summer-volunteer-opportunities. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was something that a student in the class at Sherrard suggested. So we were using the master applications that they had filled out to fill out their LinkedIn profiles. These are the master applications that you can download on the right side of our page. I've got a little icon. So they clicked on that, they downloaded it, printed it off, and they filled it out. And we were going to use the information from that on and fill out the LinkedIn profiles. So, and if you're not sure what a master application is, go back to episode number 65, which is 4 tips for preparing for your job search. So anyways, this student said that rather than carrying around his master job application, he takes pictures of his master application with his phone, and then he has all that information on him at all times. And that's a great idea. I would probably still suggest that you use a master application when you're filling out apps. But what if you're out shopping and you see that somebody's hiring and they want you to fill out an application there? If you've taken pictures with your phone of the master application, you'll have all the information you need to fill out that application in the store. And I thought that was a great idea, and I just wanted to share that with the rest of you. If you have tips like this, things that you have found to help in your employment search, share them with me. I'd love to hear them, and I'd like to pass them along to other students. And you can connect with QC Step through your social networking. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at QC Step, and you can join our Facebook group by going to qcstep.com/Facebook. These are not only great ways for me to share employment information with you, but it's also a way for you to share things with me, like that tip about taking pictures of a master application. The Facebook group is a great place to ask your employment questions. I get notifications sent to my phone anytime anyone posts in that group. So if you're filling out an application or you're preparing for an interview and you have a question, then post it in there and I'll answer whatever question that you have. Well, on last week's episode, I kind of called you out, and I called your schools out for being shown up by Mercer County High School with sending in employment questions for the podcast. And Rock Island High School answered the call, and they sent in a question for this week's episode. I guess it's not really a question, it's kind of more of a topic suggestion. So Mrs. Dyer's class asks if I can talk about open interviews. And some of you have maybe never heard of an open interview. So this is probably a good topic to talk about because you very well could face an open interview situation, especially here leading up to the holidays if you're applying for seasonal employment. So let's start with the basics. What are open interviews? These are interviews that are held during a block of time and they're held on a first come, first served basis. I'm pretty sure that the Milan Hy-Vee does open interviews. So let's say they do their interviews from 2 to 4 p.m. That means you could show up between 2 and 4, although you'd probably want to show up closer to the beginning time of the open interviews. They have a hiring manager that's conducting the interviews, so you wait until it's your turn. My first job was with Hy-Vee in Moline, and they had us line up by customer service and wait for our interview. The nice thing about waiting in line before you go into your interview is that it gives you the opportunity to get a little bit more comfortable with your surroundings. While you're waiting, you can run through questions in your head that you think you might face in the interview and think about how you're going to answer those questions. You can kind of also go through your mental checklist of what you need to focus on. The handshake, introducing yourself, eye contact, those types of things. Now I'll share with you why I think open interviews are a great thing for you. You're guaranteed an interview. Most businesses that do open interviews don't accept applications until the open interviews. So if you feel like you don't have a lot of work experience, but you would make a great worker and you can tell someone interviewing you that that's why they should hire you, this is the perfect situation. It would be really easy for if you don't have a lot of work experience, for your application to kind of get pushed down the list. But right here, the first time they're seeing your application is when you're applying. So I'm sure a lot of you that have been applying for jobs have realized that just getting an interview is a tough thing. But if you pick up an application and when they tell you when you pick it up that they're doing open interviews, that's a major win right there. You got an interview. So what's one of the downsides of open interviews? Everyone else applying for the job is also getting an interview. So you've got competition. You're going to have to be outgoing. You will need to try to connect with the interviewer. You'll need to set yourself apart from all of the competition. So be outgoing, talk about your experiences, maintain great eye contact. You'll have to be memorable because they're going to interview a lot of people during the course of that day, and you want to stick out in their memory. So you'll really need to sell yourself, sell your experience, and sell your skills. If you're going to an open interview, my suggestion would be to bring a few extra copies of your resume in a folder. Many businesses do a first and a second interview, and it's very possible that you could do a couple of interviews with a few different people there during the open interviews. And if that's the case, you're going to want to be prepared with multiple copies of your resume or letters of recommendation. If you do an employment portfolio at school and you have materials that you present to an employer during an interview, you're going to want to take multiple copies of those things. It's better to have them and not use them than to wish that you had brought more materials. And just like with all interviews, as the interview is ending, ask the interviewer what the process will be from there on out. They'll probably tell you when they plan to make a decision. Find out the best way to contact them if you want to follow up a few days later. And if you want to do a follow-up when you get home, don't call them because that would be a little too quick. But you might want to send a thank you note or an email. The note would be through the mail. Get the address and the name of the person that interviewed you, the address of their business, and mail it to them that way, or email. You can find email addresses on a lot of the business websites now. But thank them for their time and thank them for giving you the opportunity to introduce yourself and to share your skills. Explain why you think their store would be a great place for you to work and that you would love the opportunity to work there. This is the type of follow-up that can really help your chances with getting a job. It shows that you're thorough and thoughtful. So that's a little explanation of open interviews. Not all businesses conduct interviews this way, but it's very possible that you could experience open interviews. If you will be applying for a job and you know that they do open interviews and you'd like to do a few practice interviews, Gary, Carrie, and myself would be happy to help you with those. You can contact us through Twitter, the Facebook group, or you can email me info@qcstep.com. So this is normally where I give some job leads, but I don't have any specific leads to give you this week. But that definitely does not mean that businesses aren't hiring. Over the last few weeks, I've been talking a lot about retail seasonal positions, and you can assume that every retail business is hiring for and filling seasonal positions right now. Target, Kmart, all the stores in the mall, even the restaurants around the shopping areas. All of these places are hiring right now. And if you haven't watched the episode on why you should apply for retail seasonal positions, go back and watch episode number 66. On that episode, I explain why these seasonal positions are excellent opportunities for you. Also, fast food businesses are almost always hiring. These are businesses that have a very high turnover rate and they're frequently hiring. So now is the time to be proactive. Get out there and apply for jobs because the job market really slows down after the holidays, and you want to get, if you're looking for work this school year, you want to get it now. It's going to be much easier to get a job now than it will be in January or February or March. It's not really until right before the end of the school year that things kind of start picking up again. So if you need help filling out applications, preparing for interviews, or if you want advice on your employment search, you can contact me through Facebook or Twitter, or you can email me info@qcstep.com. Well, that does it for this week's episode. Thanks to Mrs. Dyer's class for sending in that question about open interviews. That's a topic that I hadn't talked about here on the podcast, so I want to thank them for bringing it to my attention. I don't have a topic set for next week's episode yet, so if there is an employment topic that you would like for me to talk about on the podcast, you can send it to me through Facebook or Twitter. You can email it to me, and I will work it into an episode. Thanks for watching this week's episode, and I will be back next week with another episode of the QC Step Podcast.